So, good morning.
Morning.
It is February 27th. It's Thursday. We are closing out February very soon here. It's around 9 a.m. We are hearing from a number of folks regarding an act relating to a statewide property assessment system. Likely, whatever language we come to on this will be folded into our larger education reform bill. But working on everything separately for a little while seems like maybe it would help our brains. So that's why we're doing it that way, as if they're separate bills. It will help the public track things. It will help us keep buckets in their little buckets, and eventually we'll all come together in a magical package to transform Vermont. Like by next week. And we looked at a new draft yesterday. That was the 24 hours was sort of the best we could do here. I understand that some of our witnesses might not be entirely caught up, and we will make the best we can of that situation. And then we're gonna finish our budget letter, which is fairly narrow after our break today, and then right after lunch, if people could be here promptly. We're referred, I think our first real, budget adjustment, I guess we got referred, but this is like H96. We have unbelievably limited jurisdiction over this. It's a quite small issue from our perspective, and I'm hoping we can move it in and out quickly. If we can't, the world will not end, but it will be good practice for us because very soon we're going to need to move very fast. And then this afternoon, we are joining House Education and Senate Education for a conversation about special education, because extraordinary costs in special education is the fastest growing part of the education fund and is not included in the reform proposal. So we're trying to get our heads around that a little bit. So with that, going back to a statewide property assessment system, Ms. Tulloch, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
So sorry about the backdrop, but it's snowing out, so.
I like your backdrop. I don't know what you're apologizing for.
Because it's backlit. Hopefully you can see me.
Oh no, you're perfectly lit. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, cool. So I am Eileen Tulloch. I work in the assessor's office in Brattleboro. I've worked there for 5 years. I was a lister in Putney, and I am currently the select board chair in Putney as well. And I would like to speak specifically to the part about appeals process in the bill. As you may know, Putney went through a townwide reappraisal in
I am very aware of that, yes.
In 2020, in 2024. And as a result of that, which is normal, a bunch of grievances came through the listers. And I think it was over 100 of them. And about 23 of them made it to the BCA process, which was a lot for our BCA. In fact, our BCA hadn't heard a appeal for probably at least 4 or 5 years prior to that. So the majority of the board didn't know what they were doing. Not to say that we didn't get through it, but they weren't experienced in it. And so I support wholeheartely taking that system out of the hands of the local BCA. I don't think it's fair to them to make them be in that position, because as we've been discussing, this is the process of property assessment is not simple. The piece that I would like to see a tweak on is after it goes to the BCA, the draft of the bill still has the taxpayer or the municipality having a choice to go to either PBR or to Superior Court. And I believe strongly that Superior Court is not the right place for these appeals in general. I feel like that choice makes it a lot harder for the towns to prove their cases. And in a lot of cases, that means that we end up settling for something that is less than ideal. And that's my spiel.
Oh, thank you. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, I'm being in the town next door and being in this position, I think I was more aware of your reappraisal process than, some other reappraisal processes. And, what I was struck with in your reappraisal process last year was, it seemed to me to be very well managed by, the select board and by the reappraisal firm. And the public was still extraordinarily upset, confused,
Yep.
and just the inconsistencies that the public experienced, whether those were mathematical inconsistencies or felt inconsistencies, sort of neighbors talking to neighbors, seemed really remarkably divisive. And so I'm curious if there are other aspects of the bill that you see on sort of taking some of that pressure off of the select board and off of municipal government, and sort of how you all weathered that stress and what your sort of perspective on that might be going forward.
Yeah. So part of the issue in Putney was that we had not had a townwide reappraisal for since 2014, so at least 10 years. And so a lot of the properties got out of sync with what they were worth. And we also know that there was a surge in market prices during that time. And the other issue in Putney was that we that year had an 11% increase in our municipal taxes and a 13% increase in our school taxes, a school rate. So that combined into a perfect storm of incredibly high property taxes for a lot of folks. As far as the in its current form is concerned, first of all, I do think that a cyclical time period is good. The 6 years, I think you've already decided on the 6 years, correct? And as far as taking pressure off of local municipalities, our three listers, they're great. But they're thinking, especially our head lister is thinking about retiring. He's re-upping for another 3 years, but there's a lot of pressure on Putney to figure out what we would do next, as far as getting someone in that office. So I guess I'm a supporter of regionalization, as long as it's not. As long as it's thoughtfully done. I think there's some issues going with the county-wide reappraisal process because the demographics and the geography are completely different. We have already started doing some regionalization in Putney, but we do it voluntarily. So we're doing stuff with Dummerston, we're doing stuff with Westminster. So if there I think if there's a little bit more input into for the towns to regionalize in the assessment area, that would be good going forward.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Sure.
Feltus.
Yes, Ms. Tulloch, can you indicated that you prefer the appeal process to go through PBR as opposed to Superior Court. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Do you feel one's not as thorough as the other, or divisive, or what?
So without getting into too many specifics, so I said that some of our cases did go beyond the BCA. Some of them did go to PBR. Some of them have gone to Superior Court. And in the Superior Court's cases, we've discovered that it's on us to prove our valuation in a much more stringent way than perhaps we would do if we were going to somebody who already understood the aspects of property assessment, which would be PVR. And so we kind of have to backtrack and create a case that is that basically schools the court into the processes of property assessment rather than going to somebody who already knows. And that's proving costly legally. And as well as we probably have to hire independent appraisals for those cases. So it's costly on our end, on the town's end, just to uphold a value. So that's why I'm thinking that that's not a good use of our time. I feel like that was in the report that PVR came up with to funnel most cases through PVR rather than the other way around. And PVR does, in this draft, still have the option to send it off to Superior Court if they feel like it's a case that they can't handle for legal reasons.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on one of your last statements you talked about, you would suggest going further. Should PVR refer a case to Superior Court, that PVR assists the municipality in defending their values in that arena? And a lot of times PVR does not support the applicant in that regard. So, you know, how would that transpire?
You mean as far in my experience, the municipality does not normally appeal the value. It can happen, I assume, but in our case, that's not what's going on. The taxpayer has appealed the value, and the town is, defending it. What? Because we don't have the resources to create our own independent appraisal. So we're spending money defending something that may not have a lot of value in return, tax wise. And so if there's a process that PVR says we can't handle this case, and it's it was especially if it was the taxpayer who chose to bring it that way. It would be helpful if PVR would at least help us defend the value.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Just one question. You mentioned you were already coordinating with Dummerston and another town. I can't remember who. But what kinds of things are you coordinating on now?
We're sharing a zoning administrator. We have a contract with we co-own a sand pit or gravel pit with Dummerston. So we're doing a lot of shared crushing and sharing expenses with crushing and extraction there. We have a agreement with Westminster and Putney for police services through the county. I'm missing some other ones, but we've been finding ways to fill some of these gaps with
So
other
it's not
towns.
necessarily around the assessing, but
No,
ways.
Right,
Okay.
but I'm assuming that once if our listers age out and there's nobody else in that position, I'm assuming that that's where we would go in the absence of a state reorganization.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm curious about how long it takes to train up a judge, for lack of a better, probably better terminology, but if the tendency is to go to Superior Court and the judge is changed for another judge, as happens periodically, how long might it typically take for the newer judge to become accustomed to how the system works and come up with a fair appraisal, fair appeal, that kind of stuff?
To be honest with you, I don't know. We're in the beginning stages of our cases. I assume that what we would do is we would submit an independent appraisal, an explanation of how we came to that value and other pieces of evidence. And I assume that would carry over to other personnel in the court. They would read those thoroughly. It's the preparation before that, before we get to that point that is the money sink, because independent appraisals cost money.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and all of the various public service work you are doing. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. LeBlanc? Hello, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Nice
you
to
hear
see
me?
you. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
we can. Thank you.
Okay, cool. First off, thanks for letting me testify today. And thank you for making changes in this draft bill. I was surprised yesterday when I read through this. And there was a lot of stuff that that disappeared and some stuff that didn't. And I think it's a work in progress.
Sir, I would just like, we are an ever changing, ever evolving group here. And so, yes, all the bills will change and I'm glad you were able to catch up. Can you introduce yourself for the record?
That was my next thing.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
My name is Todd LeBlanc. I live in St. Albans in the summertime, and I live in Florida in the wintertime. I am testifying from sunny Florida right now. I was a lister in Georgia, and then became a assessor for the city of South Burlington, where I was for 18 years. I have been the assistant vice president for VALA for 2 years. I've been the president of VALA for 2 years. I am currently the sitting past president for VALA. I hold the Vermont Master Property Appraiser's Certificate through the state of Vermont. I am also a project manager, approved project manager. Full disclosure, I currently work for the New England Municipal Resource Center. I do the maintenance work for the city of Vergennes. Their listers have decided that they don't want to do a whole lot of stuff, and so the city hired us, and that's my responsibility. It's that city right now. I had a problem with the first iteration of this bill, stating that the first three items about legislative intent. I sent in a letter regarding that and saying why it was such an issue. I didn't see any changes in that, and yet I think there's an easier way to state it. VALA, IAAO, their goal is to have fair and equitable values, and I think that would be a better way to put into the legislative intent, and something to ensure the fair and equitable treatment of all properties, something along those lines. It takes all the people out of it. The focus is.
Thank you.
Now, we've moved on to reappraisal districts and then regional assessment districts, and I'm not sure where this is going or what the goal is or what the problem is that we're trying to fix. We had an anomaly. We had a global pandemic that changed a lot of stuff. And while the CLAs dropped like a stone, it wasn't the lister's fault. And this appears to be targeted at listers not being able to do their jobs. That's just my opinion, having been in this game for so long. It's almost like we're trying to recreate the system we already have. We have 7 district DAs, district advisors, 1 manager, if you want to call. We used to have many more, and through time, the numbers of DAs have dropped because of dollars. Now we find ourselves in a situation where we need more district advisors to do the job that they were supposed to do before and can't due to their limitations, and yet we're going to call it something different and then increase the numbers again, and God knows where the money's going to be. Currently, it's very difficult to find listers, even assessors, district advisors. there are good and bad everywhere. There are good listers, there are bad listers, there are good assessors, there are bad assessors. We're going to have these assessment districts, and there are going to be good assessment districts, and there are going to be bad assessment districts. It's not going to change simply by changing the name of what we do. I think if we bring the DA's level back up to something more realistic, back to 16, which is what it used to be before it dropped down to the 7 and 1, and give them their charge back. Pay attention to what you're doing in your municipalities. I'm not saying that the getting reappraisals all on the same page is a bad idea. I'm just not sure if we need to go to this extent to do it. We have currently, I think it's just one person in the PVNR that does commercial stuff. Commercial stuff is a big deal, and it deserves far more than one person to assist the cities and towns with high value properties. I know when I was in South Burlington, believe it or not, the airport in South Burlington, it's called the Burlington International Airport because it's owned by Burlington. It's a municipal property in another municipality. There's a lot going on, and we had an appeal that took over 5 years. It's a mess, but it's reality. So we have a lot of things that are, hydro dams, wind farms, solar farms, airports. These types of things need to have more than just the average lister or assessor's abilities. We have in this new iteration of this, it's draft 2.1, some things I'm not sure about how they fit or why. It appears we want to form standards for reappraisal and stuff. One of which it says standards for data collection. And that, to me, is saying we're attempting to tell reappraisal companies how they collect data. And that's an overreach by a long shot, trying to tell a company, you have to collect your data this way. I don't think that's the proper wording in this. If we want to have a standard set of data that is reported back to the state, then that's what it should say. I think you're going to have pushback on that. We've gone to a 6-year cycle for the reappraisals. I think, especially due to the backlog we have now, that number needs to be a little higher. I've heard 10 years. I think at least 8 years would make more sense, because should this process happen, there's going to be a backlog still. We need to pay attention to that. We currently pay $8.50 to the towns per parcel for reappraisal and maintenance of the grand list. That appears to be shifting to the state PVNR, and while it's changing its base, it's not fixing the problem. Reappraisals have gone through the roof value-wise, cost-wise, because there's so many of them. It's just supply and demand, it's economics. Nothing we can do about it. But it's the number one reason why towns have gone so far between reappraisals. They don't want to spend the money. They don't have the money. How much money they have to come up with in 6 years is still a problem. That part doesn't get to go away just because we're changing it to 6 years, but it magnifies the problem. When a town could save money for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, that $8.50 could work, and that's why they waited so long. If we're going to go to 6 years, it's going to be an issue. $8.50 per parcel is not going to cut it. Double that at minimum. We have this challenge where the towns have always done, well, not always, because they didn't used to be an education grant list. The towns have done the reappraisals, and they bear an incredible amount of cost that are hidden from the normal person's view. Not just a reappraisal company, but there's time involved, resources involved, paper and toner and the lights being on in their office. These values, these numbers need to be paid attention to. And the biggest reason is the split between the actual taxes. The town either, you can say between the full cost of the reappraisal based on the tax rates that come out of it. The municipal tax rates take up a quarter, 3/4 for municipal to a quarter for the towns. That's pretty standard these days, and yet the towns end up paying far more money to get their values. Is this process here going to change that? Who's going to pay for this reappraisals? If the money for the reappraisals is going to PV&R, who's going to pay for the reappraisal and who's going to be responsible for the reappraisal? I'm cutting this down as best I can, sorry. Assessment districts. When you have assessment districts, we're going to have issues with so many towns in the district, like say Chittenden County. Let me use that because that's where I worked. You've got Burlington and South Burlington and Colchester and Williston and Shelburne, and these towns do it their own way and have been very successful in doing it their own way. And yet, if we go to a regional assessment district, so a lot of people are going to have to change. They're not going to want to change, and they don't necessarily need to change. There needs to be a circuit breaker if you're going to go to regional assessment districts where towns can opt out if they can do the job themselves adequately. Regional BCAs. That's another word in my mind for an appeal board. Without mandatory training at the BCA level, it's not going to change anything except for there's going to be a backlogged in a reappraisal. All the BCA hearings that come out of a reappraisal are going to be forced onto this one faction versus the BCAs at the local level. I think BCAs at the local level can still work if they have mandatory training. I think that's where the wheels fall off the bus on local BCAs. They do, there are a couple, this is a technical thing, there are a couple references in this draft bill where it mentions listers, and in other places it says listers and assessors. I think they need to be all changed to listers and assessors. Question for you guys. There was talk about VCGI being involved here, and I don't see that anymore. I haven't heard it recently. Is that still a goal?
Mr. LeBlanc, yes, that is still a goal. And we're going to need to wrap up your testimony in a minute. Can I ask you a question since you just asked me a question?
Sure.
Great. You said you work with NEMRIC and we sort of talked about consistency and quality. All of the testimony we've heard in past years was that 6 years was really like the bare minimum of appropriate regular reappraisals. And so your advice around 10 years surprised me. I'm curious where you're coming from with that.
I think due to the backlog where we're sitting here, I've heard numbers. You ask 6 people what their opinions are, and you're going to get 6 different answers. That's the basis for appraisals everywhere. With the backlog we have, I think trying to cram them all into 6-year periods could be overwhelming.
Okay.
So the 10-year, I came up with 8. It's in the middle. That's
okay.
where that
Thank
number came from. I am encouraged that VCI is still going to be involved. I think there's an opportunity here to really help the whole state, all the municipalities. Burlington did a reappraisal and they used oblique aerial photography, and it's absolutely amazing. It gains detail where you don't have to necessarily leave the seat, but you find stuff that's been missing for years. And in these smaller towns with a lot of rural areas, these flyovers, which are done in winter, you'd be amazed what you can find. Zoning, have you looked at having mandatory zoning? A lot of these properties in towns where they don't have zoning get missed. because they just simply don't know about them. Somebody will build a camp up in the woods, somebody will be a house. You just don't know, and finding them is an issue. Finally, VALA is a watchdog. That's the way VALA has always sat. And we look for unintended consequences. And in this case, we don't want to see this forced in just to force it in. The 2-year time period is concerning to get it done for 27. And we're playing with the grand list. This is where the dollars come from. You all know that. But playing with it, especially at a time when you're trying to figure out your education funding, is dangerous. And we don't know the unintended consequences for that. We're dealing currently, I don't know if what you guys know about a program called VT-Pi that PV&R uses. It's been 6 years in the making, cost millions of dollars, and we are, and this is listers, this is assessors everywhere in the state, are extremely frustrated because it still has too many issues to be an active program. We were used as guinea pigs to see if this program worked, and now it's being forced in again, and it doesn't work. And if that happens in 6 years, where a company is basically copying another program, and they can't do it in 6 years, a 2-year time period for this, it worries me a lot. I think that's pretty much all I have. Again, thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you very much, sir. We have one question for you, and I just really encourage you, we are going to continue amending this and are happy to continue sending new drafts along to you as we go.
Thank you,
Representative.
Ms. LeBlanc. This isn't a question, just a statement. So we just heard the other day that there's only 6 district advisors. So you had talked about 7 and 1. My understanding is only 6, correct?
That my understanding is there's 7 with 1 supervisor. I could be entirely wrong. There could be somebody who retired, moved on, did whatever they did, and they're lacking 1. I could be entirely wrong on that. You could be absolutely right.
No, but you're
That'd be a
right.
question for Jill.
You're right. We used to have a lot more help. That's the point.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of the problem with where we are now. You pile that on top of a COVID, and it's an anomaly. It'll work itself out over time.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. And as we sort of continue this work, we're going to try to separate the sort of mass reappraisals from the daily, weekly, annual grand list maintenance. And so sort of encourage you to think about those boxes. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate
Hope to
all
see
your
you soon.
work. Hi, Carolyn.
How are you?
Good,
I
Joe.
see you up there.
I see you up there too.
Take care.
Thank you.
Ms. Boshkoff? Are you able to join us?
Yep.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I apologize for my voice. I was sick lately, so I almost
Lot of stuff
canceled
going around.
my testimony. Give me 1 second. My name is Natalia Bochkov, and I am a lister in town of Plymouth. I started my work last year. So I'm going to read quickly my testimony. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. So I want to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to testify and provide my honest feedback on the state appraisal bill. It is an honor to be part of this hearing. Thank you so much. I have worked in the public sector for over 30 years, both in the United States and abroad. My background includes extensive experience in public education, technical support, web development, and graphic design. I hold a master's degree in applied mathematics and computer science. Taking on the assessor role in Plymouth has required significant learning and training, a challenge I have embraced with dedication. I regularly participate in workshops and training provided by Division of Property Evaluation and Review. Last year, I earned the Vermont Property Evaluation Assessor certification. I truly support the establishment of regional assessment district and the professionalization of Lister's office. While the Lister model once worked, well for rural Vermont. Today's properties are far more diverse than they used to be. Modern property valuation is highly complex, requiring expertise in real estate market, valuation methods, and proficiency with various reporting and analysis systems. The field also involves statistical and mathematical modeling, public relations, and on-site data collection. This bill will give listers and assessors the opportunity to demonstrate their professionalism, just like specialists in any other field. The vision of establishing assessment district and integrating proven practices is excellent. Regional districts will create a clear chain of command where teams can support one another, fostering a sustainable and well-defined work environment. There is a lot of emotional feedback regarding the perceived loss of local control. As I understand it, this primarily means that towns will no longer elect their listers. However, how many voters truly understand the complexities of a lister's job? To what extent does the current system function as popularity contest rather than a merit-based hiring process? Additionally, the requirement for 3 qualified listers per town is simply not feasible for small municipalities. Many Vermont towns also have a significant number of second homeowners who contribute to the tax base but they have no say in the process. Moreover, municipalities still control key decisions, such as tax exemptions, through public referendums, and each town has a board of abatement to handle individual cases. Property valuation is a science based on data. Like any scientific process, there is always a margin of error, and our job is to minimize that margin as much as possible. Across the state, we have enough talent to staff regional districts, but not enough to sustain the lister model in every municipality. Act 68 and the ongoing trend of towns eliminating the listers, board of listers in favor of assessor offices provide strong evidence of this shift. Town of Plymouth has this on the ballot this coming election next week. The idea of creating standardized guidelines and procedures is outstanding. I offer it. And I believe the PVR is already making significant progress in this area. They are also advancing a solid professional development track for listers and assessors. I attended all their classes and I couldn't praise them, more than I could. So those classes are outstanding, simply outstanding. So they did, I understand they put a lot of efforts put this all together, creating this curriculum and all these courses and classes for listers and assessors. And it's all pays off. I would say that the effort to move it forward, it's not easy for them. I could see it. It's not easy, but they do an outstanding job. I felt I have to do that. I have to say my thank you publicly for what they do. Our district advisor support is above and beyond. So whatever the issues we may have, we can simply just pick up a phone and call them and get resolution right away. So district advisors is our lifeline. So, and the fact that we increasing them, the number from 6 to 12 is outstanding. It's perfect. And we will need a standardization of all our applications. So we are working on the same plane. So all our ICAMA is the same across the board, across the state. So it will help in the long run, help us and them to do the knowledge transfer of knowledge between the listers and assessors, to help the technical support. So it's a lot of benefits there. in the standardization of guidelines and procedures. And we are on our way to, and I believe our PV on their way to making it strong, making it truly standardized. I don't know about, this new system they're trying to implement. While they rolling it out into the world, so to speak, module by module. I believe that if they would roll out the complete application as is, and I'm talking there is my background in computer science. If you roll out something like that in complete package, it will be a nightmare to train all these people to understand and grasp how to use it. And the fact that they do it gradually, little by little, module by module, it has its merits. And while they do that at one thing, they tweaking all the bugs, they tweaking all the flaws of the system. So I would disagree with Todd that yes, it takes a long time to roll something out like that, but there is an objective why it takes so long. So in another application like the mapping, the VCGI, yes, it's a perfect application for us to all to use. I use it daily. So while it may have some inaccuracies here and there, and there is some reason why it happens, but we would love to use it. We would want to use it. So there is a good objective reasoning why do we need that. So on the appeal process should involve knowledgeable and experienced professionals at every stage. So keeping the first step of the grievance process with the assessor before moving it to PVR, and I think the PVR is more knowledgeable, PVR team would be more knowledgeable than PCA. So the PCA, they consist of community members, which are not necessarily know what, and I completely agree with Eileen. She said a lot on the appeal process, and I 100% support her testimony on that as well. I would say the same. BCA, they need significant training, so to speak. So maybe regional BCA, but I'm not sure how it's going to play out because BCA is still volunteers and they are not necessarily easy to find, all these volunteers, community members, to dedicate their time to listen to a lot of grievances, let's say during the reappraisal session. Maybe PVNR team would be more logical to create a strong PVR team for the appeal. I think our PVR will have more say to that. We'll have more better input on how it's going to all. What's the best practice would be. So equalization studies for the assessed district make more sense as a larger pool of data will yield more statistically accurate results. And it's very difficult to argue about that. Besides, the equalization studies will be, gone after a few years when assisted districts will be implemented. So there's won't be need for it because we will be all reappraised every 6 years. 6-year cycle. I think I would do 3 years of cycle. Reappraise it even more often. So to have this to have us as accurate as possible. But the idea maybe do the rolling reappraisal, 1/6 of the properties annually, and then every 6 years complete reappraisal again. Yes, that will do. That may help as well. So the zoning, I agree with thought that zoning is something we probably need in every town because the zoning is usually that trigger for listers or assessors to go and correct, update our records, what we have, property records. So I strongly believe that property valuation is a science, and all we do, we are wardens, we keep the records, the assessors, we keep the records of all property cards accurate. So, and that is our goal. That's what I believe in, and my testimony. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much for
Great.
speaking. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate your written testimony because your voice is very hoarse and I really hope you feel better soon. And I hope you can join us again as we make amendments to this language to continue to testify. Any Representative Maslin, did you have a question?
Maybe a little question, ma'am, and I appreciate you being here and also your, what we could maybe call multi-layered experience that you bring to the job. Someone testified earlier this morning about a regional assessment district and the fact that there may be difference in topography from one town to another, which is something I hadn't heard before, and I wondered if you had an opinion about whether that would make regional assessment difficult, more interesting, challenging, whatever you care to offer. Thank you.
I didn't catch it. So district assessor, different topography, different.
Topography, some towns flat, some towns, hilly. And whether that would affect how regional assessments were done, town by town. At least that may have misunderstood what the witness was saying, but that's what I think I heard.
I'm not sure. I don't think this is it makes any sense. So regional districts, it has nothing to do with that. Let's put it that way.
Maybe I'm not clear, but
For
I
us, we assess whatever property we get to see. So and it doesn't change with creation of regional assessment districts. It creates a structure. It's a well-defined structure. And
Okay.
but the actual business, the work assessors, it doesn't change the assessor work.
Thank you. I think that's
speaking
the
on
answer.
that, right. So in speaking on that, this is why right now it's a golden opportunity for you to make it all this workforce, make them professionalize the everything, all of us. And as you could see, there are a lot of assessors, and mostly who speak with you, they're already professionals. So, and they work as assessors. So, and listers eventually they evolve into assessors, and that's what we are. We are assessors. We assess houses. We keep records accurate. I believe human resource. It's not who is working in the human resource field. They know how it's done properly and well, and that will give us also, and they can help us and give us a chance to be to have like a seat at the table, so to speak. So be professional.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Good luck on Tuesday, Natalia.
So much. Thank you.
Yes.
Samantha, would you like to join us? Thanks for coming in. Worked.
Okay,
Mostly. Great. Oh, now it's perfect.
okay. I don't know why, it's like it's fine. It's not like presenter mode, but
That's fine.
luckily, hopefully I know what I'm talking about, so I won't hear.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. that is-
So my name is Samantha Sheehan. Thanks for having me back. I'm the municipal policy and advocacy specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I want to say first that unlike some of the other issues we're before this committee about throughout the session, VLCT members have declined to endorse a single position on a reappraisal system. And that is natural because, as you've heard in various testimony, Vermont municipalities are facing different challenges in their approach to reappraisal. Some are doing a fantastic job and are well-resourced to maintain excellent grand lists. Others, as you've heard before, have struggled over time to fill these critical positions of lister and appraiser. And towns of various populations and parcel counts are affected by the current law and CLA differently as well. That said, we really appreciate the opportunity to hopefully provide some constructive feedback on the most current draft of the bill. So from VLCT's perspective, it's important that the future end product of this legislation maintain local control of municipal grand lists, adequately resource municipalities to allow for the conversion and implementation of shared data and appraisal systems, provide a reasonable timeline to hear grievances and appeals wherever those are heard, and that the development of this new legislation receive the input and that the ultimate work product have oversight from local officials. Most importantly, VLCT strongly supports the primary recommendation of PVR in their second report that you received a month or two ago, which is to rely on a diverse stakeholder group of valuation professionals in developing the standardized guidelines and procedures for a regional reappraisal approach. Here are some excerpts from the PVR report that endorse the areas where PVR perceived that these stakeholder working groups could be most helpful in developing components of a regional system, as well as helping to navigate a functional plan for transition. So as I understand the most recent draft, I'm gonna walk you through the roles and whether or not those are state or municipal. So we have regional assessment districts which are comprised of municipalities. We have PVR, which is within a state agency, a state Department of Taxes, that would establish the enforceable standards and guidelines for reappraisal. We would have a district advisor, which is an employee of the state, an employee of PVR. It's not explicit, but I think implied in this scheme is the reliance on third-party reappraisal firms that would be contracted by the district advisor, so a contract held by the state. And then you have a lister, which is an elected municipal official that would continue to conduct regular grand list maintenance at the municipal level, would hear first round grievances. The grievance decisions are subject then to appeal. The appeal would go to a regional board that lister may or may not serve on. And then following the conclusion of the appeal heard and decided by the RBCA or the appeals board or PVR, the lister, municipal official, shall amend and complete the grand list and shall attest and certify the grand list under pains and penalties of perjury. So this is retaining the ultimate responsibility of grand list maintenance with a municipal official, which is the desire of VLCT and municipalities across the state. But I have to point out that in the ongoing relationship between municipal government and state government, this is strange. The point of a contract is the enforceable agreement. Right now, if a municipality conducts a municipal-wide reappraisal using the services of a reappraisal firm, it is the municipality that can enforce that contract if the appraisal firm fails to deliver services intended. And maybe most important in that relationship with a reappraisal firm is the duties and authorities to uphold the right to appeal. And so I'll go to my next slide. So this creates a little bit of a who's on second situation, or to be totally frank, who can sue who in this system, right? Like who is liable for mistakes, failure to comply, failure to meet state deadlines and guidelines and standards? Is it the municipality? Is it the firm? Is it PBR? And then when mistakes happen, they will, and they could be systemic errors, or they could be individual and only affect a single parcel owner. Through the course of remedy of the parcel owner or owners, who is liable for that error. So I'll pause there maybe, or.
I think it's a really helpful point, and I think that's the exact tension that PBR is sort of trying to work through with us, that the responsibility of the state to the statewide grand list feels out of balance right now, and moving everything to the state level, I think would be incredibly uncomfortable, right? And so how do we balance sort of where the appeals rights sit and where the responsibilities sit? And so I thank you for putting a fine point on it.
I'm not making a policy recommendation, but there are other conversations you've heard from, I think, the lister from Putney about the authorities which municipalities hold now through state law, limiting their ability to or defining their ability to enter into intermunicipal agreements. And there's basically two kinds. Ledge Council would do a better job explaining them than I will. One is very lasting and creates essentially a new entity which has the powers and authorities of a municipality, may be a mechanism of municipal officials, but can set its own budget, set its own fees, has its own way of existing separate from the individual municipalities which benefit from it. So this is like a communication district or a solid waste district. The other type of intermunicipal agreement that's allowed is much more valuable and sort of dependent on the ongoing participation of the legislative bodies of that municipality. And so those are things like the shared gravel pits. But then one town, select board
Where would you
leadership
put
changes.
regional planning commissions in that?
Regional planning commissions are an instrumentality of the state.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they are not within municipal control, although they service municipalities in meaningful ways. So on the subject of grievances and appeals, I hope you remember one thing I said. It's this: with the transition and modernization of a reappraisal system, you should assume a low rate of competence and a high rate of grievance and appeal.
That's a good point.
Excuse me. Please do not jump into another witness's testimony until you're called on. Thank you.
Yeah. So
My
I
apologies.
am. Appraisal. What I can say about that is that it was very challenging to navigate the grievance and appeals. There was a high volume of them. We were fortunate to have a really experienced BCA of long-serving JPs and city councilors. We had a professional appraisal department within the city of Burlington. But there's no getting around volume and the timeline that those appeals have to be performed at. So I use Burlington as an example because the appeals were covered in local press, and I was able to easily confirm that they had a 5% appeal rate for the second round to the BCA. But also because that is the most recent reappraisal that we have at the scale we're sort of discussing here. So I think 5% is a good number. I would plan for 7% for first round grievances. The IAAO in their report provided to PVR projected in a first level appeal rate of 2 to 3% and said that statewide this would be 7 to 10,500 appeals annually. Other states who have worked under this system for a longer period of time, homeowners and property owners are more accustomed to navigating modern systems of reappraisal. Those have appeal rates of 1 to 5%. So even in some states that have been doing this for a long time, there may be a high rate of confidence. They still are getting up to 5% rate of appeal. So while there are inherent benefits in terms of fairness, equity, consistency with a regionalized appeals board, it may not be feasible. That's all I'll say. So for example, okay.
Maybe a simple question.
Yeah.
With regards to appeals, we had testimony earlier this morning. Should appeals go to Superior Court or to PVR? Does the league have an opinion on that?
I would defer to the listers and appraisers and the attorneys who have navigated the defense,
Okay, thank you.
defense evaluation before.
Yes, thank you. The question I have is, Burlington, did they use their assessors to reappraise, or was it a professional assessing firm, so to speak?
I think Joe Turner could speak to that more when he testifies, but there's a city assessor in Burlington who's an appointee of the mayor. There are assessors which work in that department, and Burlington contracted an appraisal firm, which at that time was Tyler Technologies. And so they were an out of state. This was also a pandemic era reappraisal. There was not the practice of going into homes.
But they were certified or approved by PVR, correct?
I would assume, yeah.
I just to clarify what you meant by that last bullet. When you say it's not feasible, do you mean the savings aren't feasible or the system is not feasible?
It may not be feasible to hear the volume of appeals. If you're going up to a parcel count of 10 to 35,000 parcels for a single appraisal, and then you have, so here I'm not picking on Windsor County, I just Googled
It's fine.
something and it came up. So Windsor County has 24 municipalities, so each of them, that could be a body of up to 24. Hopefully they would have professional support with attorneys and clerks. They have a population of 58,000 and approximately 32,000 parcels. So a 1% appeal rate on 32,000 parcels would be 325. 5% would be 1,600. It could be more. There could be thousands of appeals.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And Representative Gum, will you wait to be acknowledged before you speak? Yes, thank you.
I can just wait. I can wait.
You don't need to,
Well, what I'm having trouble I think we're gonna have a lot of appeals. I live in Windsor County, one of those is a class action lawsuit against listers that probably explains a significant number of that. What I wonder is if we're gonna get the appeals anyway, regardless of whether we have regional appraisal systems or whether we have local appraisals, because I think there's a lot of distrust and concern just generally right now.
Sure.
So yeah, how much of this is because of the appraisal district and how much of that is just because people are challenging their appraisals?
I think that what I would point to is the evidence from other states, which have appeal rates as low as, and in fact, below 1%. So there will always be appeals. And there are just legitimate errors in, someone's land records may say they have a deck but they tore the deck off 3 years ago. It's not there anymore. So they're coming and saying, I shouldn't be charged for this, basically. Or they may have subdivided property, which was not correctly updated in the land records of the municipality. I think that when you introduce a newly enforced state guideline, when you introduce third-party actors that are contracted, especially if they're contracted by an agent of the state and not of the municipality, and the municipality is not managing or enforcing that relationship. And then you introduce new digital tools that most Vermonters have not experienced before. I think then the rate of appeal will be inflated in that transition period, which, as you've discussed as a committee, could be 6 to 12 years. I bought my house in 2016. It was last reappraised in 2012. I've never been through a reappraisal as a homeowner. And there are thousands, tens of thousands of Vermonters in this situation. So addressing municipal-wide reappraisals in process. So this is not news to you. 135 municipalities are actively under order to reappraise. Additional reappraisal orders are yet to be issued. And municipalities are currently, so those which were issued after the 2023 equalization study have contracted reappraisals with firms going out to 2029. According to PBR, approximately 19 towns per year over the last decade have reappraised. So that gives us a little bit of a forecast between now and 2027. And municipalities have already and will continue to encumber local costs for pending and ongoing reappraisal services. So this is to address the current provision in the bill, which would end reappraisal orders and relieve the force of law around them on January 1st, 2027, and claw back the per parcel funds that have been provided to municipalities that have yet to reappraise. There are pros and cons to a strategy that makes those two things happen on the same day.
I just want to say, I think the clawing back is just never going to happen in a million years.
Great, I have a slide on that. We can.
Let's go.
Okay.
You don't need to spend time on it. We won't spend time on it.
So even putting the clawback aside, the per parcel fees do not cover the cost of reappraisal. They do not cover the cost of grandless maintenance, especially in small communities.
If you could really get clear with us about what the cost of grandless maintenance would be, that would be super helpful.
We can survey that. I don't know if we can do it on a timeline, but we can talk about that later. Anecdotally, no one has ever told us that, oh yeah, $8.95 per part, great, we're raking it in. Because the cost of personnel resources that you've heard from the listers and appraisers, their testimony related to that. So municipalities often have to supplement from their local budget when they go out to contract. They likely have paid some type of upfront cost to hold the firm for the time of the reappraisal that's booked out well into the future. And then of course they're paying various costs for their listers to maintain the grand list in the meantime. So when you turn off the reappraisal order and say, now we've made the switch, it is currently unclear what happens to those ongoing reappraisals, which the act of the reappraisal underway could last for more than a year. And then certainly we know there are already towns contracted out several years into the future. And so PBR's recommendation, again, I'll remind you, which the LCT supports, is that a qualified group of stakeholders on both sides of the state municipal relationship, including vendors, that these external reappraisal firms, participate in a stakeholder process to make recommendations to you of how to navigate this fairly and practically. Because there is a benefit to getting, because another option is you could put in this bill, starting effectively July 1st, 2025, the reappraisal orders end and there is no force of law. That's an option, but there is a broad benefit on both sides to completing as many appraisals as possible prior to implementing the regional districts. So getting everybody's records fresh and having recent and reliable valuations. The more that happens between now and the switch, the better for everybody.
I think that's important to PBR as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just realized we don't have your slide deck.
I will, I finished it at around midnight last night, so I will send it.
He's always send at midnight. So
Okay,
we can
cool.
Follow along on our own. I think that's helpful for some members. I've even taken notes in a PDF
Okay.
on my own computer before.
Cool.
But it also means I don't know how many more slides you have, so I have to rudely ask you.
Two.
Thank you. Okay.
And this one,
I usually look ahead so that I can sort of manage time, so thank
let
you.
me just quickly read this, because maybe we can just, consider as you deliberate on appropriation schemes to support reappraisal in the future, now and in the future, consider small town minimums. And also for the purpose of ongoing grand list maintenance at the municipal level and for the purpose of mass reappraisal.
I think that's a really interesting point more broadly. I think Vermont knows the value of a small state minimum in a very profound way. And yet we don't talk about small town minimums very often when we're talking about dispersing money. So thank you for that idea.
I mean, the per parcel fee is a unique way that the state has chosen to consistently support a municipal expense. In most other situations, we're competing at a municipality against municipality for funds. VLCT supports broadly methods that include revenue sharing, such as the per parcel fee. So consider municipal delegation. Or should I give a primer on the concept of municipal delegation? No? Okay.
We've all been through.
Okay. Or an opt-out procedure. So larger, more dense communities and those that are currently or in the future will experience intensive redevelopment will require more frequent reappraisal of certain districts or property classes outside of the 6-year cycle. The cities reappraise property classes very frequently, and we have small cities, they're not large cities. So you add one hotel, that changes the hotel market. So in addition to that, municipalities of all sizes are demonstrating the ability to conduct frequent reappraisals to a high standard of performance. What I've learned is that it is not safe to assume which municipalities are struggling with this and which are not. Some large, well-resourced municipalities are having a really hard time. Some very small rural communities are doing an excellent job and they love the system the way it is now. So if a municipality of any size can demonstrate the ability to achieve a to be determined standard and guideline to be set by PBR, then they should be exempt from regionalized system. This may, in particular in Chittenden County, have broader benefits. You know, if you peel off Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, then that may help with the scale of the remainder of that district in approaching the other municipalities reappraisals. That's all.
Thank you. The peeling off of the very large cities, I think has very different statistical implications than peeling off smaller towns. Where one of the benefits of moving to this is the statistical sort of validity of having much larger swaths of property being, and more properties being reappraised at the same time. Representative Kimball?
I had a question on the last slide, and it seems like in smaller towns, it's really the dedication or work of one or two people that really makes a difference between a well-maintained grand list and not. And if that person retires, ages out, moves on, is there the support behind them? So that's always the question. Some people are in their job 30 years because nobody else is taking their place. But so I'm just thinking about that as a concern for towns that opt out, and then when would they opt back in if that person moves on?
That is a concern that we hear, and I think it rung true, the testimony from Putney, like, this is going really well right now, but, you know, we all sit around the room and, you know, what happens when this one person moves on or two people move on? That is a conversation that happens around every municipal position, you know, like select board, clerk, treasurer, election staff, planning commissioners. That is a perpetual perennial challenge for small communities that are driven by the expertise and hard work of volunteers that are within the community. So I think there is for approaching the legislation to accommodate a municipal delegation. For reappraisal, there is precedence in the law for oversight within the state agency. So the trigger would reside with PBR, would be, I think, what I would propose. So they would say, you know, we have assessed prior to your upcoming reappraisal that your municipality no longer is resourced to do this. We're going to fold you back in.
Right before you, just folks, I know the agenda, or maybe you haven't noticed, I'm aware that the agenda is running overtime. I think that's okay. We're gonna reduce the time we spend on the budget memo. It's actually not all that much content, but we are going to skip the break. So if you need to excuse yourself for a moment, don't be, you know, checking the clock for 10:30. Representative Higley.
Representative Kimball, to your point, what's been helpful over the years for us is those district advisors. And now when there's so few of them that have to cover so many towns, that is an issue of the help that we may need when we have a new lister come on.
Fair enough.
So
Yeah.
it's key.
That's a good point.
It's trying to create more clarity between municipal delegation and opting out. If the goal of what we're doing here is to create more consistency statewide, an opt-out option just makes me nervous that,
Sure.
you know, we go through all of this and then a bunch of towns opt out. So we're in a different but same spot a couple years down the line. So would you imagine in an opt-out situation, perhaps they don't have to participate in the regional assessment districts, but they would still be held to the same standards as those that are in the municipal assessment districts? And how is that, and would that just be what you're proposing for municipal delegation?
Yeah, I think that, I think you have articulated the vulnerability of an opt-out. Like an opt-out in the past is done by vote, town vote. That, you know, public opinion changes faster than state regulation. So, yeah, so the sort of, if the goal is stability and a uniform approach, then the formality of municipal delegation would provide that better than an opt-out provision.
Thank you.
Just real quick to Madam Chair, we're going through a reappraisal now, and it's a little bit different this year for some reason, or the past, it's going through a 2-year reappraisal cycle. The firm that's doing it basically comes into our computer and takes it over at certain times. They're not there physically very much of the time. That's a real burden for us listers when we have to, you know, complete property transfers, homestead declarations, current use, all these changes, especially when the office is only open for 3 days a week.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
We certainly do it, whether it's on a Saturday or whatever, but we get it done. But again, it is a burden through that cycle of that, working through our computers. They tie it up. And we've actually had to purchase another computer station and all that so that we can do some of the other work.
But
But
might see that.
Thanks.
Just one quick
Yep.
follow. Samantha, do you have an idea of the number of towns that have open lister positions at this point, or the number of towns that are moving from an elected lister to an appointed lister?
I'm aware that VLCT researched that within the last 3 years since the first reappraisal act. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can follow up with that information. It'll be a few years out from being fresh, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time and hope we can keep on working away at this.
likewise.
Ms. Wright. Hello, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. I apologize. I didn't realize I was unmuted earlier.
Ah,
It should default. It
I
should
yell at my
default
computer
to muted.
often and it's always scary that someone might hear it. Yes.
Luckily, it was just muttering encouraging things. I really appreciate everything that Samantha had to share. And it's great to see that some of the common themes that VALA and VLCT have talked about, I think were reflected in her presentation. So I appreciate that. Would you like me to start with introducing myself for the record?
That would be delightful. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll try to keep it brief. I know you're running over the introduction. So I'm providing testimony as former VALA president and also in my role as chair of the Board of Listers and contract assessor for Proctor, Paulet, Chittenden, Pittsford, and Shrewsbury. Sorry, I'm chair of the listers in the town of West Rutland, where we still have listers at the moment. That may be changing in coming years. I am also a VMPA level of the currently voluntary Vermont Assessor Certification, a PVR certified project supervisor for townwide reappraisals, and a licensed fee appraiser. And I'd like to start my testimony with a story of an experience that many, or if not most, of our listers in Vermont, listers and assessors, just went through. So our primary job as listers or assessors is that of maintaining and then reconciling and then signing the grand list. There are a lot of details to get to that point, but this is the annual goal we must achieve. The essential summary document for this work is the 411. I, as well as my peers, take this job very seriously of reconciling all of the changes to assessment with the bottom line, if you will, of my town's 411. At the end of January, all listers and assessors in Vermont were asked to attend webinars hosted by PVR and Pat Santoso, Catalyst Axiomatic, to train us on how to import our grand list from the old grand list program NEMRIC into the new state grand list software VT-Pi. This was scheduled to go live the following week, so many of us, including myself, attempted this. It did not work as planned, as we were not able to reconcile the 411 from VT-Pi to NEMRIC. Listers were frustrated, assessors were frustrated, PVR advisors were frustrated, and this process of implementing VT-Pi has not gone well, to say the least. But that is not the point of my story. It is this: the listers and assessors were frustrated because they couldn't reconcile the 411, the summary of the grand list. The problem was that tax-exempt properties were lumped in with taxable properties. This is a pretty huge problem that we need to reconcile on an annual basis. So if I can make one point about what job we as listers and assessors do, same job, different titles, it is that reconciling the grand list is our body of work. We have a municipally based system right now that is working and has been working for more than a system. We have a body, more than a century, excuse me. We have a body of educated and experienced listers and assessors that have been doing this work for decades. Granted, the majority of us are at or near retirement age, but as the director of PVR has pointed out, we do not have staff resources to take our place. So I give that as an introduction to the latest, my comments and concerns with the latest draft of this bill. while we as listers and assessors appreciate that this draft dials back the enormous changes to our current assessment system, and we also appreciate the nod to our hard work after an earlier perceived dismissal, many questions remain. So I've just updated comments I had from the beginning of this process that I don't think we've really answered yet to date. And they're important. And the first one is control over the grand list. My story at the beginning of this testimony demonstrates the enormous responsibility listers and assessors assume to maintain and sign the grand list for their towns. This draft hints at more and more control from TAX over the grand list. We are very concerned over state overreach into controlling not only the education grand list, but also our municipal grand list. This is the base of the pyramid of funding for our towns. So it's important, and it's a task we take very seriously. The cost of revamping the assessment system in Vermont and who will bear that cost is a tremendous question. The cost of making transitions to assessment districts and more frequent reappraisals have not been properly considered and have been grossly underestimated when questioned. In addition, economies of scale to be realized have likely also been grossly overestimated. All of the transitions in the study will be more costly than our current system. Every 6 years at a current cost of $120 per parcel for a reappraisal, how is this affordable for small towns? And everything I'm hearing is that the cost is going to be borne by the municipality, and particularly with a state contribution that hasn't changed in decades of the $8.50 a parcel. That does not cover the cost of this. The costs are increasing, the frequency of reappraisals are increasing. So how does this decrease cost for maintaining our grand list? I have heard testimony to this committee that converting to a different CAMA system is not a big deal if done during a town-wide reappraisal. I've been through this a few times in different towns, and I can tell you that it is a very big deal, and it adds to cost both for the reappraisal contractor and for the local assessor or listers to review data and ensure that it translated, if you will, from one program to the other. It usually does not very thoroughly or accurately. Further, when towns go from elected listers to contract assessors, this is also significantly more costly. Sometimes towns get what they pay for in appointing a professional, sometimes they do not. Next, did someone have a question or?
No, someone coughed, I'm sorry.
Competency of listers or assessors, whether they are hired or elected. Apparently, any change to the voluntary certification process and making that consistent for listers, assessors, and private contractors has gone out the window with this draft. Correct me if I'm wrong, and that may change. Vague requirements for elected listers are currently in statute, but are they the same for assessors? It appears that more and more towns are going to an assessor versus a board of listers model, and I believe we need a certified tax assessor program in Vermont, and one which is required in order to serve in this position. Currently, all training is voluntary, and there is an assumption that an assessor by label only is more qualified than a lister by label only. Without required qualifications for assessors, towns, taxpayers will pay 2, 3, sometimes 4 times the hourly rate for a contract assessor without any promise of having more highly qualified valuation professionals. Due diligence of work completed. Another factor that is being grossly underestimated is the time and staffing required to complete valuation work, and even the record-keeping part of our work, the data, if you will, needed to analyze and value properties accurately and equitably. Add to that a lot of bureaucratic work in managing homesteads, current use, and other exemption programs, and there are a lot of time-consuming details. Important details, but time-consuming ones. Moving to larger assessment districts will not lessen the amount of time required to do this job properly. But I fear that the quality of that due diligence will get watered down, if you will, with larger districts. I have testified before about the concept of geographic competency, which has been a key concept for appraiser and assessor ethics, read USPAP as referred to in IAAO study training for years. Will this local knowledge and due diligence in light of geographic competency be sacrificed by a larger bureaucracy? I believe it will, based on prior experience with appraisal contractors and appointed assessors whose work I have followed. When those contractors do not take the time to develop that geographic competence, the quality of the work suffers. Second to last, a common CAMA system. I know this is a big elephant in the room, but it has to be asked. The question has to be asked and answered. How on earth will regional assessments and reappraisals be done if the region doesn't have the same CAMA system? And how on earth will district advisors advise us on how to manage data consistently without a common CAMA system? Don't get me wrong, we do need standards. I've recommended that to Jill Remick for years. We need standard fields to be used for our data collection. This is part of the problem with the whole implementation of the new VTPI program, is that the cart was somewhat put in front of the horse, where CAMA was to be the source of truth. The assessment program was going to contain all data that was going to flow directly to the grand list. But it's simple common sense. You don't need a background in database programming to understand that you can't extract fields from a database if those fields are not there. So this common data standards would be most likely best done with a common CAMA system. But I say that at the risk of the state choosing a common CAMA system that is not state-of-the-art. That has to be a state-of-the-art program. Those towns, which are all of mine at this point, are in the process or have already converted to a state-of-the-art CAMA program at significant cost to all of those towns. We can't go back to a lesser program. But even within those programs, there are not standards, and that's a problem. And lastly, this is a topic that's come up from time to time and has been unable to be resolved. Contiguous parcels. The law on contiguous parcels required to be combined on a single tax bill should go away. This is my opinion. VALA could not reach consensus on this because it's a thorny issue to unroll. But it is, among other problems with the contiguous parcel rule, it's an inadvertent discount given to large property owners. If the legislature wants to address equity, this would be a good item to address. Further, if you want to track data consistently, that is hard, if not impossible to do, with all of these inactive parcels that show up as essentially holes in your maps. Take a look, you can find up to 10% in many towns where you click on a parcel and VCGI's map and it says data not found because these inactive parcels are not mapped. How can you understand the data that you're analyzing to do a reappraisal if you don't have clean information on that?
Thank you, Lisa. We have received a lot of testimony about that over the years, and John Adams actually flagged it for us again this year, and I think we actually did leave it out of this bill, and we need to put that cleanup in here. Thank you for that. Any questions for Lisa? Well, that was your last. I didn't interrupt you, did I?
That was
Okay, great.
no,
Okay,
you
good.
didn't. I know that's another topic, but
It is, but no, thank you for the flag on it.
It's something we deal with literally every day in our work. And it's problematic. It's problematic. I'm going into 4 townwide reappraisals in the next 2 years, and I wish I had completely accurate information on all of those inactive parcels so that when the data is given to the reappraisal team, they could understand if that 600-acre parcel is one deeded parcel or if it's 6, if it's 10 separately deeded parcels, and how you value that is quite different.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Hope we can talk to you again with our next draft.
Thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, if you would like to join us and have the last word on this topic today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. For the record, my name is Joe Turner. I'm the current city assessor for Burlington, Hartford, Vermont before that, and then I worked in Buncombe County, North Carolina before that, thus the accent. See, that's the accent, right? So the accent, you remember it, right? Okay. So echoing Lisa, I don't disagree with what she said about the parcels. The parcels are a problem. I'm implementing a process in Burlington to fix that, but that's just in Burlington, just for our internal information. So again, thanks for having me. And I really appreciate the work you guys are doing on this. This is great. This is really moving in the right direction. And I really appreciate that. When I first came to Vermont, I was like, yes, it's hard. So many small, municipalities you have to deal with. And my first initial thought, you could probably go back and see the testimony a year and a half ago, is that's consolidate the districts. And here we are. So this is wonderful. But I do caution on speed. There's a lot of ironing out to do when you consolidate these things. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think Lisa actually mentioned that as well. And also, I get the last word here, so I get to see what people said. And what Todd said about Burlington. We're for change. We want to see what's best for the city, and we want to see what's best for the state. So if that involves change, then we are about it, right? And I didn't even plan on really talking about appeals, but it seems to be a hot topic today. I mean, I do have thoughts on it. My main thing was to talk about some of the data consistencies, going to a statewide Canvas system, the benefits of that. Yes, it will be a heavy lift, but it's possible, and it's truly the only way forward in reappraising on a larger jurisdiction, right? I mean, it really is. Another thing I want to bring up real quick with the language in the proposal is it should have, like, I was talking to some people around the office. There should be some language that supersedes city charter, because right now it's written as a statute, and charter would be above a statute unless written saying that it supersedes city charter. So throwing out there, yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you.
With we have language up and down in our charter about assessment, so this essentially would override that. The things I like about this is just the efficiencies, right? So I'm gonna talk about efficiencies, and I'm gonna talk about what could be, right? There is a heavy element of reality to this that I'm not ignoring, but I want to let everybody know what can possibly happen here if we do this right and do this from the foundation instead of rushing into it and doing it wrong. The definition, real quick, the definition of mass appraisal and USPAP. USPAP's appraisal standards. And just for common knowledge, I'm, I think, one of 315 federally certified instructors in the nation. So I teach this topic. They call it a universe of properties, right? So what do you think of a universe? You think of like gigantic. So, and I think everyone here is privy to the fact that these models work better with more data, right? The better your data is, the more you have, the better the model is going to work, the more efficient it's going to be. So when you consolidate these districts, 2 thumbs up. Okay. Moving on to just a single CAMA system and talk about some data consistency and what can possibly happen here. And I do want to kind of echo what Lisa said. What I'm getting ready to get into is going to sound great. It's going to be flowers. It's going to smell great. Yes, let's do that. But it is a heavy lift, right? It's going to be a very heavy lift to convert data from individual systems that municipalities are using to a larger system. It's going to take work. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's the way to do it. It's the ultimate way to do it. And it can't stay like it is right now with antiquated software that we're using that lost basically support in 1997, I think, with Box Pro, right? So yeah, that needs to figure itself out. And if you go to a statewide Canvas system, or I say statewide, and the IWO report said regional. If you're going to go to regional, might as well go statewide, and I'll tell you why. Reporting. You've heard people talk today. Oh, the 411. We reconcile the 411. We pull that report out. We pull the extract up. The extract breaks. We don't. Burlington's extract's broken right now too. I mean, it's just part of that process. If we go to a relational database with one Canvas system, the reporting can potentially become automated, right? So we don't have to pull extracts out anymore. The state would go in and essentially say, I want to see the 411 for Burlington, 411. There it is. It's not like, okay, let me pull extract out, upload the extract, let me audit the extract. Oh, it's broken. Let me go back, fix it. It becomes one thing, right? It becomes one, all the information is living on one server. You're able to get that information at will, pivot that information on whatever town you'd like, still keeps local control because the local government is able to still keep their parcel maintenance. They're able to go out, look at the properties on an everyday process, make their adjustments when needed. You mentioned topography earlier. They can adjust for topography. That's their thing, right? So they still have that control. That still gives them the local knowledge Lisa was talking about. It still allows them the geographic competence that we're all talking about. It allows them to still work within our system, but the state has the view of the whole system. At Burlington, I've uploaded a document that I think you might have. You probably are all aware of our TIF districts that we have.
Yes, we are indeed.
Yes. A couple of them. Yeah, a few of them. So I created an automated report in our system for TIF districts. So it's a live report. So if anybody wants to open it up, take a look at the proceeds that Burlington receives for any fiscal year, it's there. You know what I mean? So and I did that just to see if I could do it, just to kind of pass it around, and it's there. And that's what can happen, right? That's what can happen at the state level. Oh, how currently is Burlington doing right now? Let me look real quick and see. So, and with that too, there's homestead downloads. We have to deal with property tax transfer records. All this is really, really important for what we do because we have to qualify those sales for our study, for the CLA study. And our process now is sometimes we get them downloaded. Then we have to manually enter them into the system, and then we have to manually download the homesteads and enter all that. And in one state system, it would be an automated process that happens overnight. Parcels would still get flagged for individual municipalities to review, but it is just much more efficient. And this also, it's almost like this would be a communication between state archives, right? So they deal with some of these things, like the systems can almost like go have a cocktail after work and catch up with each other. You know what I mean? Because you run these processes overnight, and all of a sudden, all the PTTRs drop right into the system, and it's fluid. So that, I mean, again, these are efficiencies that I've worked with. I've been a part of all this when I was in down south in North Carolina. We had these programs, actually the current Canvas system that Burlington's using. And we had it custom in a way that benefited us, and we did every single thing that I'm talking about right now.
Excuse me, do those integrations currently exist between the?
It would have to be written.
Okay.
Yeah, they would have, no, we have one that exists between our permitting system and our Canvas system.
Yeah.
That anytime someone pulls a permit through our OpenGov system, it automatically updates overnight into our Canvas system, and it's flagged for us for review. So we have a pretty strong permitting system in Burlington. So we rely on that for our property pickups and our groundless maintenance every year.
Just wondering about the integration with VTPI as well.
VTPI, what we do right now is we extract. It's a text extract out of our system and uploaded to VTPI. In all one system, we do that because there's numerous systems. Then you have to map the extracts. If we all had one system and one platform, we wouldn't have to map the extracts, and we wouldn't even really need VTPI because we'd be able to pull it right out of the system. Everything that exemptions can live in the system, homesteads, all the TIF reporting, like you see that I showed you, all the 411 could essentially live in just one system.
Tell me about the 4 different camera systems currently in use in the state,
It has something like that, about 4 or 5.
how the integration of them into VT-Pi can be automated more efficiently.
Yeah.
You're going a little deep, okay.
Yeah.
This is all, we're already like in deep territory. That's.
Yeah, and I'll speed this up.
I like that.
I know. Okay.
It would eliminate, one system would eliminate the need for that secondary communication to the state. It would be direct communication to the state.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one of the things. The other thing I want to challenge real quick, and I think this is important, are reappraisal contractors. And again, where I'm coming from North Carolina, there were really no such thing. We did it all in-house. And when you move to these bigger districts, when you move, Chittenden County's 40, 45,000 parcels, move to a bigger district, crunch the numbers, and I'm questioning this, I wonder if anyone has done a cost benefit analysis of hiring contractors with internal assessment teams, reappraisal teams, right? So if you're looking at $150 a parcel to do a reappraisal, you're talking about $7 million in Chittenden County alone that we are paying, not necessarily Vermonters, we're paying contractors potentially from out of state. Another thing is that they don't have accountability per se. And I think we lose that a little bit. And if we were to go to an internal reappraisal system where it is completely in-house, we would be accountable, right? I'm working here 40 hours a week. Come ask me the questions if you want, and I'm not going to do your reassessment, drop the mic and leave, right? And I think that gets overlooked. So when people tell me we don't have the money, well, in my opinion, and I think in reality, our money is going to contractors. And I think that in and of itself should be addressed, especially when we're looking at language, potentially statutory language that mandates contractors. That's dangerous. You may hire, but shall, I don't know about that word for actually hiring contractors. It becomes a slippery slope and actually very dangerous. And I think that answer lies within, you could have, for $7 million, you could have a staff to work reappraisals for 40,000 parcels in a 6-year cycle. I guarantee you. Instead of throwing money in, and it would be a buildup, right? It would be 6 years. It wouldn't be a contractor come in a year and a half and spread papers all over the place. It would be a slow roll. It would be just better, in my opinion. And it would save money in the process. Going back to the appeals process real quick, again, I wasn't really going to hit it, but I think there's some language in this new legislation that creates the BCA at the county level. I think Chittenden County's got 19 or 20 current assessment municipalities. And you put 20 lay people in a room and you try to explain value to them, it's not easy, right? It's like herding cats. It really is. It becomes that situation as to where it becomes almost impossible to get 20 people on the same page, first educated, second on the same page to make a decision associated with value. And a lot of times those decisions are wrong because the participants are uneducated. Those systems work best. I've been a part of it. Those systems work best with about 6 to 9 people, industry people, tax lawyers, real estate agents, you name it, that they already have a sense of knowledge associated with, so it doesn't take that extra bump to get them educated to make a decision. But really, at the end of the day, as long as you have about 3 steps in an appraisal process and the taxpayer feels like they're heard, it's going to work. And then they have the ability to go to the courts or go to the higher authority. And what Eileen was saying, the difference between PVR and a court appeal, in my opinion, is we get into legal matters. People can appeal exemptions. That's a matter of the courts. That's a matter of language. It's not a matter of value. When things are a matter of value, yeah, I agree, they should go to PBR. But we've had people appeal exemption status, and that should go to the court system, not PBR. Yeah, Burlington we have a board of tax appeals. We don't have a BCA. So we have a group of about 7 people that hear these at the BCA level before it goes to PBR and or the courts, and that's charter. Funding, touch on that real quick. The funding element of it, the 850, we all know it's a little bit weird. Crunch those numbers real quick on a 6-year, 40,000 parcel, 6-year reval. That district's getting about 2 million. If you want to stay with contractors that are charging $150 a parcel, that's 7 million. That's not going to work. I think the answer to the funding would be to create a reval budget, not we're going to give you this amount, make it work. It should be this is how much we need, and we need to make that work. It's almost like a municipal budget where you adjust the rate based on the need, right? So maybe the assessment district says we need this amount of money on an annual basis. You might not need the 5 million all up front. We need $1 million this year, 2 million, 3 million, or whatever. Maybe build that into a rate. Maybe additional on the ed fund rate, because let's be honest, the reassessments or reappraisals probably helps the ed fund the most of anything, because it's really important. And that would be a way to solve that issue instead of saying $8.50 per parcel. That just becomes a little bit crazy. So, and I think even with the statewide and some of the stuff that Samantha's gone, and I worked with her in the Weinberger administration years ago, all this would still maintain local control. That is an important element. And that is something that I have learned in my 4 years in Vermont. That was not like the first thing that came to me. I was like, big government. We need big government. We need efficiencies. And I've learned that is not always the best thing. It's taken me a couple of years for that, but I have learned that. And yeah, like Lisa said, the parcel issues. And the last thing, and I want to make this quick. The last thing I want to say, I want to just throw this out there, and this may or may not stick. But one of the big things, and this is a concept, is putting the responsibility and onus on taxpayers to list their property, right? So let's make it their responsibility, not the listers and assessors' responsibility. Okay, so you have to list your property correct with me. Yes, I'm going to pick up a permit. But some of these towns that don't have permitting, some of them that have no way to actually track changes in property, it becomes an unfair situation where they're almost hiding from the tax man, right? You build a garage in a municipality that doesn't have a permit, you're not going to tell anybody, right? Because you're going to get out of those taxes. You want to get out of those taxes. So it needs to be their responsibility to list. And this is not popular. But there is a thing called a discovery period, right? So if it becomes knowledge that your garage has been there for 10 years, there's retrospective taxation, right? It's almost like shame on you for not letting us know you had this property. If when you don't do that, it becomes your own. And when we move forward with this, which is the language now, we find the garage, we move forward with it. It rewards them for not telling the truth. It does. And if you want to plug budget gaps and clean your data, do something like that, and I guarantee you people would start listing fast what they have and what they don't have, and you would receive a lot of money in discovered properties for retrospective taxation. I know it's not a popular thing. A lot of municipalities do it, though. It becomes equitable because it says, hey, you missed. We carried your responsibility the last 5 years. Now you need to bring it back into the pot. Right. Again, not fun, hard thing to deal with, but I think it could be a way forward in the future. Just lobbing that one out there. So, just think about it. Let us do over. It's a thing. So yeah, anyway, I just want to keep it short. I know we're on a time frame. So does anybody have any questions?
My question is, I think you have very meaningful handwritten notes there and you've said a lot of very valuable things and I've written down some notes and I know everyone, but if you're able to give us written testimony, that would be delightful.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of detail here and I want to make sure I'm cross-referencing it as we move forward.
I sent one item in, but it wasn't the full extent of what I'm going here. I was like, write some stuff down, trying to.
No, I appreciate that.
Saying,
Okay.
like the appeals, I didn't want to speak to appeals today, but I felt like I need to. There was a couple of things I saw in that bill that needed addressing, like the ninth.
So just if you want to send us more, that would be.
I will, I definitely will.
Representative Brannigan.
A quick comment.
Yeah.
I appreciate your testimony and I appreciated it 2 years ago. I learned a lot. I want to point out to you I was born in Vermont. I've lived here my entire life, which is older than you are.
So you might be surprised. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, about the contractors, I know that small towns, so I live in Franklin County, it's north of you, between you and the Canadian border.
Mhm.
That's Franklin County on Lake Champlain. The small towns up there would prefer to have local elected listers. I had it in my community for years, until nobody ran any,
Right.
and they couldn't get anybody to run. So they had to hire a contractor.
Mhm.
And it's working okay. We've got a list. I know the reassessment needs to happen. That hasn't happened for many years with one of those towns. But it's getting people to run for it. And I don't even think there would be question to pay them a fair salary.
Right.
But they don't want to do the work.
Well, I believe it becomes a supply and demand of listers and assessors, right? So I think the state has put a heavy want for this profession. You know, 3 listers per municipality is a lot of people. So when you go to a more consolidated version of assessment, you can maybe you don't need one anymore. Maybe you can rely on someone else to handle that work for you. It becomes a pool, like an internal pool, and not even contracting someone. You own it at that point. But yeah, no, I agree with you that the state itself has put a heavy burden on the profession in what they are asking, you know.
Just real quick to comment, this is kind of a reverse of what you're talking about with the people that try to hide a new garage, let's say.
Mhm.
So there's also folks that maybe tear down a barn or a garage,
Yep.
right? 4 or 5 years goes by.
Mhm.
And again, we as listers, we aren't responsible that you didn't tell us that's, a lot of times people
Sure.
say, well, you need to back pay, we need to get back pay for 5 years,
Right.
And it used to be even on land prior to us using tax maps
Mhm.
for acreage. Because a lot of times people would say, hey, I bought 50 acres of land and all of a sudden now we've used in tax maps and instead it's 62 acres.
Yeah,
They certainly get upset.
sure. And it goes both ways. It would have to go both ways.
It goes both ways.
It sure would, because if we did something, we had errors that they paid too much, it would have to in order to be equitable. Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And if anybody else anything, just let me know and I'll type something up and I'll send it your way.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time. I think this is, again, going in the right direction. And I think we will all benefit from what comes out of this committee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, team, we are switching gears. We are moving to our budget memo and Chris Roop is going to join us. But we have backup from more JFO team for tiny details. Or enormous details, whichever you think they are.
Great. And for the record, my name is Chris Roop from the Joint Fiscal Office. It's nice to see everyone today. I've asked my colleagues, Nolan Langweil and Ted Barnett, to join in case you all have any questions about a few specific provisions. Can everybody read that okay?
Yeah.
Great. So these documents are posted under my name. There are 4 documents total. I'm only working off of 2 of them. The other 2 are there for your reference. You can see the full language of the governor's recommend FY 26 big bill language, as well as the summary book, which is a nice little document to skim through for additional context. But in the past, this presentation is keeping with the theme that we did in BAA and last year, where the Appropriations Committee will ask the other committees to weigh in a letter with their feelings and opinions on various items in the budget. So this is an opportunity for you all to share that feedback. There's a cover memo here that is, I'm just going to start with and then pivot to the chart. But the cover memo,
Chris did not draft this out of his imagination or his policy recommendations. I did this with him and I'm putting it to the committee.
And this is substantially similar to what the committee's seen last year and everything else. So we start off with lots of pleasantries and
Makes it sound.
very exactly. Yeah. And the third paragraph I draw attention to that I think the way the chair was hoping to go about this was have this short cover memo and then have the chart attached to it to show the appropriations committees which sections you all took a look at. That chart will show you, which I'm going to pivot to, shows you the language out of the bill draft, as well as some explanatory notes to translate in something resembling plain English what the language does.
And then that third paragraph is really just sort of a continued protection of our jurisdiction. And that like whether a tax policy is good or not is not really the business of the budget, it is the business of one of our bills. And so just like, please, let's not put it in the budget regardless of whether we like it or not.
So that is what that third paragraph is conveying in a nutshell. So there are also some high-level comments here about the appropriations themselves. There's a paragraph here about the base appropriations that the Appropriations Committee typically asks Ways and Means to look at. That's operating the tax department, the various property tax relief programs that are standard every year in the budget, as well as the pilot appropriations. So the language here is substantially similar to what the committee used last year. And I think the committee in its letter might be in the second paragraph says that, you care mostly about the revenue side, slightly less about how the money is spent, but the committee has typically expressed broad support for those appropriations. So that's what that base appropriations paragraph says.
Yeah.
So being a newbie to the Ways and Means, could you explain a little bit further, Chris? I mean, I'm looking at these base appropriations, all these line
Oh,
items.
the chart will help.
Okay, the chart will help. The chart will actually have some numbers that say like what they're for and what the numbers are. Yeah,
Okay.
but
Thanks.
then the one-time appropriations, there was one one-time appropriation that the committee would be interested in, and the governor had proposed $4 million one-time appropriation from the general fund AOE to support statewide education transformation and build capacity within the agency. Those are the administration's words from their language that they have proposed. And then there's a paragraph here that describes that the committee is continuing to take testimony, and there's an acknowledgement that that the education transformation is going to require financial support, but it's not clear yet whether $4 million is the right number.
And so that sort of what I said to Chris in more plain language was basically like, yes, it will definitely take money to make this transition. No doubt about that. How to spend that money is still entirely unclear in all ways. And whether it's even a base or a one-time expense is very unclear in all ways. And there are many committees taking much more testimony about this. So please leave us some money, but we're not committing to how to spend it yet. Yes. Oh, and I asked Rebecca to go watch the recent appropriations testimony about this.
And they, at the time, they didn't discuss it as a committee, they just took the testimony. But is there a reason we aren't also talking about a state financial system since having a robust, real-time, accurate set of data is important to evaluating things like whether our foundation plan is working?
I don't think I know what you mean.
part of the challenge has been getting accurate, and it's actually very similar to the appraisal system conversation.
But like funding the Agency of Education, that data that we need.
To actually have a data system.
I think that's part of maybe that's what the $4 million would be for. We don't.
That's not what, they're just totally external consultants. That's what she said.
No, and so what the point I'm trying to make in this paragraph is we know we will need money. We have no idea what we think we should spend it on yet. Maybe it is building out a data system at the Agency of Education in base funding. Maybe it is one consultant who will work for the next 30 years. We just don't know yet. We're going to keep on figuring that out.
Fair enough, okay.
And I hope this is sufficiently vague to address that.
Sorry,
Yes.
in other words, this is all kind of like a placeholder TBD.
It's like, don't spend the money on something else, but we aren't committing to what we think you should spend the money on.
Okay.
There were two additional items that the chair asked me to include in this. One was, I believe you all took testimony a few weeks ago on the volunteer income tax assistance program. There's language here that expresses support for increasing the base funding for that program by $148,000 over FY25 levels. This is a program that helps lower income tax filers file their taxes in order to claim credits and refunds. And there was some statistics put in here from FY 2024 based on the materials that they provided to you all a few weeks ago. And the purpose of the funding request would be to have a full-time employee for the program in the 5 service regions that the community action agencies support this program through across Vermont.
And we spent a lot of time last year taking testimony about the challenge of folks, especially navigating the homestead and property tax credit forms. But there's also a lot challenges with whether or not people are accessing the low income tax credits. And we've taken some testimony about that this year. But if people aren't filing well, then there's no point in us passing good tax policy is really what it comes down to.
Would these be state employees with, no, so they're nonprofit that were, okay, thanks.
And then the second item is capacity for education funding analysis. And it basically states that the committee identifies a need for additional analysis over the upcoming fiscal year related to education funding and requests that the Appropriations Committee consider appropriating additional funds to JFO to pay for any contracted services that the legislature feels is necessary to support the legislature's ongoing work on this important issue.
Currently, the budget isn't $250,000. It's in the JFO office for additional analysis.
I don't know that for sure.
And I think JFO needs additional analysis for a few things this next year. And I just want to make sure that if we need to do further analysis, especially on foundation formulas, we're going to have the capacity to do that.
They need a budget number.
Yeah.
We will work on that.
Do we have capacity this year? Because I don't know how we moved to it.
Sometimes we have some capacity. We might have capacity this year as well.
That's the memo, the cover memo.
Yes.
This is for the 26th budget.
Yes.
It's not BAA that's gone.
We already did that, yeah.
Okay, just to be sure.
So I'll pivot real quick to the table.
And folks, we actually didn't have the tax department in to tell us about their budget for the year. I'm so sorry. It was just an oversight from me and Sorsha, and they're actually not available this week because of school vacation or whatever. A lot of people are on vacation this week. And so they're going to come in the week after town meeting, which is not good timing for this. Generally, this committee supports what the tax department wants to do in terms of spending, and they have given testimony to the Appropriations Committee. It is sort of famously the best functioning department in state government, so I tend to not want to mess with them.
So I switched over to the other document for your audits as well.
They're also better funded. To be blunt, you get paid.
So to answer Representative Higley's question, from a few minutes ago, at the very top of this chart, the other document that I switched to, shows you what those base appropriation numbers correspond to and what the amounts are. There's nothing particularly spicy in here, but if you want more details, we're happy to point you to where you can find those in the governor's budget materials. You'll see the B1100 item, that $4 million one-time that we just discussed is mentioned there. And then there's a bunch of references to language sections. And in the interest of efficiency, if the chair would indulge, maybe I could go to the very last one, which pertains to Nolan, and then Nolan can move on with his day.
Sorry, let's do that for Nolan.
We're gonna go all the way to the end on E345. There are some changes proposed to Title 18 that would essentially remove references to the Accountable Care Organization. Since One Care Vermont, the state's only ACO, is ceasing operations. So you'll see that the expenses of the board, and this is the Green Mountain Care Board in this, yeah. You can see how statute apportions those costs under current law, but that subsection 4 referencing the ACO is proposed to be deleted, and 2 and 3, those numbers are proposed to be adjusted upward. And that reflects the fact that the ACO, One Care Vermont, is ceasing operations. And we have now reached the sum total of my knowledge on this item. So any additional questions or explanation, I would defer to my colleague, Nolan Langweil.
Nolan, is this just that we don't need authority for something that doesn't exist?
What it does, for the record, Noel Langwell, Joint Fiscal Office, this is bill back. And what it does is it split, when the ACO went into effect, we split the bill back up between the insurance company. So it used to be the insurance companies and the hospitals. And then we added the ACO. Now the ACO is going away, so we're getting rid of the ACO and reapportioning it back. Most of it's the hospitals and some portion of it to the insurance company.
Yes, Representative Maslin.
Thank you.
I will caution you that you were jumping in front of Representative Higley on the regular today.
No, I'm sorry.
You just can't see him because he's behind you. So I'm letting you know. Go ahead.
The same amount of bill back generally, but reapportioned, is that what I understand?
Yes.
Okay, easy, thank you.
And I guess my question is, are there any new individuals added to the Green Mountain Care Board?
In their budget, they do have, I believe, 3 new positions.
That would be that increase of those 3 new people would be developed through these percentages to each of these groups, correct?
Not necessarily. I believe they're asking for general fund to pay for these positions.
Oh.
Okay. I'm pretty sure.
Which then moves it outside of whatever we're doing here.
Although some of it might be bill back, actually. I'd have to get back to you on that. Most of their budget is split between the general fund and bill back, so I have to follow.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that?
Thanks, Nolan. Farewell. Have a nice day. Oh, we're gonna see you this afternoon. Okay, we're gonna also see Nolan for 15 minutes after lunch. Sorry, we did not combine them, but it's only across the hall.
So I'm going to scroll back up to the bottom of page 1 and I'll go through things in order. D100.
I want to jump to pilot, actually.
Sure. Pilot. So
Oh, sorry, I meant PTT, not pilot. I'm sorry.
Yeah. PTT is D100, the property transfer tax allocation. So every year in the budget, you will see a big chunk of very wonky language that shows how various pieces of the property transfer tax revenue are proposed to be allocated in the upcoming fiscal year. So my colleague Ted Barnett can weigh in with the details on this, but over on the right side, you'll see the explanation of how, and I wasn't kidding when it's really wonky and technical, how all of the money is redistributed. The forecast is expecting 80.6 million in total revenue. And the thing that I think is particularly interesting is section 3 at the end here. That is what distributes the $10 million that goes into municipal and regional planning. You all might remember that this was a topic in the BAA where the governor's proposed allocations aligned with the statute, which would distribute the money 70% to regional planning, 20% to municipalities, and 10% to VCGI. And the budget you all passed last year, Act 113, had a different allocation. I think it was 82.4%, 12%, and 4% respectively. This will, now we're talking about FY26, but a similar issue. The governor is proposing how to allocate $10 million that goes to municipal and regional planning. And the back of the envelope math is actually really conveniently easy on this since it's such a nice round $10 million number. So you can, without getting a calculator out, see that roughly 77% would be proposed for regional planning, roughly 12.6% for municipal planning, and roughly 10% for BCGI.
I want to offer to the committee that this felt like our business when it was in budget adjustment because it was a clarification of statute that this committee had worked on very extensively. Now that it is in the budget and sort of moving a fiscal year out from our original intent and it is not a clarification of legislative language anymore. It's just the usual notwithstanding that happens in the budget every year. And I actually don't think it's really our business anymore. But since we just looked at it in budget adjustment, I didn't want to have it disappear off the face of the earth for folks. It is now just about spending money. It is not about our original statutory intent of passing something. And so it moves sort of out of our hands to some degree. Yes, Representative Feltus and then Maslin.
Can you remind me what the original that we're notwithstanding, what that formula is?
The formula in that sub 3 is 70%, 20%, 10%. I think that one of the key takeaways that I neglected to mention was that all 3 of those functions, the regional, municipal, and VCGI, would be receiving an increase over FY25 levels.
Representative Maslin?
Yeah, having gone through this percentage argument over the years of where the money is getting shorted, I think this is all, even though it's not our bailiwick, I think it's all fine the way it's proposed. I don't have any problems with any of it. So.
And I don't have any problems with any of it either, but I can't find the water, where it goes to the water people.
The clean water surcharge.
Yeah. Is that in here?
I might phone a friend on that one.
Deborah, Joint Fiscal Office, the clean water surcharge isn't considered in this, the way this notwithstand is kind of done and allocated every year in the budget. It kind of rides separately, even though people often think of it together.
All right, but it is in there, they're not getting written out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Representative Brannigan, you'll be excited to know that before crossover, we are going to spend some solid time on clean water.
Oh, I can't wait.
I know you. The fee is set to sunset, and so we're going to need to spend some time on it. Yes. Yeah.
Newbie question, B on there towards the 1.2 for municipalities, what is that? Like, I know the 7 for planning.
Just for regional planning, planning activities.
Just on the municipal.
Municipal planning.
Okay, yeah.
And it's grants made through ACSD.
Yeah, great, thank you.
It is going to get way less exciting after that one. So, or I should say after the next one. D101, A1E proposes to transfer $77.2 million from the general fund to the education fund. That is intended to offset projected increases property taxes. Where you will find that in the budget.
Folks, we are working on the timing of this is what it is. We are sending them a memo. We are working the yield bill. I will be working with the chair of the appropriations committee as we work through the yield bill. And if we wind up with slightly different numbers, that will certainly, the yield bill will be more important than our than our memo that we send to the Appropriations Committee. But yeah,
It's just, what's the impact of putting this in our letter?
nothing. I mean, it's
Is it to hold that, say, please don't spend the 77?
yes. And I mean, frankly, like these letters are courtesies between committees. They don't have a,
Well, having
Permanent.
that on the other side, we took them quite seriously.
okay,
Just-
Okay.
So I
okay.
want to know what it means to have.
It means that it's being held. And the final details of our yield bill will be more important than it.
Well, as long as they don't spend it someplace else.
Yes. I promise I am in very regular conversations with Chair Shy about the yield bill and this transfer as we do our work.
The next one is another TID issue. He gets all the fun ones. There are some changes proposed to the Cannabis Regulation Fund. Let me take a step back. Under current law, the excise tax revenue, the 14% excise tax revenue, is channeled into the regulation fund until FY26. And then FY26, that funding was to return to the general fund. The Cannabis Control Board anticipates that next year, their cost of operations will be about $4 million more than the anticipated revenues from fees and fines that go into the regulation fund, which was originally envisioned to be the source of funding the control board's operations. So the language that's proposed would allow the first, $4 million and change of FY25 year-end balance in the regulation fund to remain in that fund to meet the control board's expected costs of operations next year. And then the residual balance above and beyond that amount, which is expected to be 8.4 million, would then be transferred 70% to the general fund and 30% to the newly established Substance Misuse Prevention Special Fund in another section. The E312.4, which is not on this sheet because it's really less of a ways and means issue and it's more of an appropriations issue, is the governor's budget recommends creating a new special fund to hold that 30% that's earmarked for substance misuse prevention, which is a little different from the current practice of appropriating that funding through the B300 section. Ted, did I get that right?
Yes, so I'm going to drive this call, but just to add a little more context, in fiscal year 24 and 25, fiscal year 24 excise revenues, we're paying for fiscal year 24 control board expenses, but because in fiscal year 26, you don't have the excise revenue going to the regulation fund, you have to prepay those fiscal year 26 expenses. So that's why it may look a little lower. It's lower than the transfer that's in the BA.
And folks, there's no universe where fees for cannabis are going to fully cover. Even there's a question about if we need to adjust the fees. There's no universe where it's fully going to cover the scale of public safety that we're asking the Cannabis Control Board to cover right now. And we could take weeks of testimony with the Cannabis Control Board to come closer. I feel like we don't really have time this session to do that. Yeah, Representative Campion.
So to make this work in my little head, the 4,035,000 stays in the regulation fund. 2,614,000 is going to that special fund. Is that
So the 6 would be going into the regulation fund. That's the projection from what fines and fees are expected to generate next year. Yeah.
and what's going into the new special fund?
It would be the $8.4 million estimate, or I should say 30% of the $8.4 million estimate that's on the top of page 3.
We use this as an opportunity for education for newbies again, to go back to the comment and my outstanding colleague, Representative Feltus, about the proliferation of special funds. I know we don't talk about what we use it for, but where do we say maybe it doesn't make sense to just proliferate special funds, or is that even something we talk about?
We can talk about, I mean, I don't want any special fund really ever again. Either, I think we need to stop proliferating special funds. We have a real mismatch here on sort of, I don't even know why there was ever sort of intent in another direction, because it didn't make sense, but that was long ago.
Talk about that in this committee, or is that outside our jurisdiction when somebody proposes to set up another special?
It's really technically the appropriations committee's jurisdiction, not ours. I think we just are money people, so we might have opinions about it.
And thank you. And to back off a little bit from Representative Holcomb's question, I gather if we want to learn more about what the special fund is going to do, we should go talk to Human Services outside the room.
No, I think this is the Gov Ops Committee generally does.
No, I
cannabis,
need to learn
right?
more, but I can do it outside. Thank you.
And we can have Pepper come in and talk about all this if folks would like that. And there is a cannabis bill coming to us before crossover. Of my, like, housekeeping, not fee changes.
I might have just misheard, but it's reading that 70% of the 8.4 goes to the general, and 30% to the special.
Correct.
Okay, yep, I thought I heard you.
No, I apologize if I'm misspoken. Representative Canfield's question was, if 30% of the 8.4 million. Is that new special fund?
And so this is, I want to sort of go back, this is in here so that we can be aware of sort of this mismatch, and it's helpful for us to be aware of this mismatch. We actually, if folks would rather, we can be silent on this topic. I don't have a strong feeling on it. I just think it's important for us to be sort of tracking the mismatch, because eventually we're going to need to do something about it. And that is not this year.
Well, yeah. I was just going to comment that originally, those taxes and fees were supposed to cover the operating expense of the Cannabis Control Board.
Yes.
And here it is, we're having to subsidize it because the fees are not sufficient. And even though it was planned to be self-supporting.
And my understand and we can take up testimony about that next year, probably.
Is the cannabis bill you're referring to limiting the number of retail establishments?
I honestly have no idea what's in it. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
I have no idea what's in it. I'm sorry.
Right.
Someone might have told me once, but I don't remember anymore.
That's coming from GovOps.
Yes.
That's my billy.
Okay.
That's
Can you go find out for us?
I've asked.
Okay.
Report back, please.
Miscellaneous.
Report back.
Okay, okay.
I'll ask you at lunch or something.
Would folks rather stay silent or leave it in?
Yeah, it's okay to leave it in.
Okay, great. Okay.
It shows a tracking.
Okay, great. Onwards, Chris.
All right, now it's going to get way less interesting. So E139, grand list litigation assistance, this language is standard annual language. It is identical to what is in the current year's budget. And just for another possible newbie question is, the way the budget is organized is the E section will have a lot of descriptive language, and the number that it corresponds to matches it gives instruction on that respective appropriation. So E139 should be speaking to what's being appropriated in like B139. So like there's a method behind how things are organized in the big bill. E142 is standard annual language around pilot payments, and it stipulates that the pilot payments are in addition to and separate from those appropriated elsewhere in the budget for correctional facilities. You'll see there's a separate line for, I believe, $40,000 for correctional facility pilots. Again, this is very common language that you see in the budget. It's really not particularly interesting.
Chair, does that pilot program just go up by a certain percentage every year? Is that based on?
I'm going to ask my colleague Ted Barnett to weigh in on that.
Sure, Ted Barnett, so it depends on the value, the insurance replacement value of properties that are provided to AOA. So that's one piece. It also depends on CLA calculations. And so depending on the relationship between those two variables is how the pilot payment fluctuates year to year.
So if there are properties in particular towns, it's adjusted for that CLA just like everything else.
Except the calculation, I'm gonna be here talking about pilot, I think tomorrow, yes, tomorrow. But it operates backwards, so the state valuations are multiplied by the CLA to bring it down to townwide values instead of dividing as you normally do for education property tax calculations.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
And I believe the correctional facility appropriation for pilots has been $40,000 consistently.
since the beginning of the program.
Okay, thanks.
All right, E 142.1 is very, very technical language. There are two things going on here. One is you'll see on the top of page 4 some added references to a 4C. That references the governor's recommended language calls this the municipal buyout reimbursement program. My understanding is you may see that in another bill that's moving its way through the legislative process, but that's why you see the 4C added to the pilot special fund language, since it's proposed that the pilot fund be the funding source for this program. The other piece, which since we're not looking at that buyout program here right now, the other piece to draw your attention to is references to the city of Montpelier were stricken from here. And that is not because Montpelier is not getting money. It's because what is happening in the budget is there used to be a separate pilot appropriation for the city of Montpelier. That is being removed, and Montpelier's pilot is being funded in the overall pilot program because there's sufficient revenues now to fully fund it. So that it's purely technical change to reflect the fact that that separate Montpelier pilot line is showing a 0 in FY26, but I don't want people to think that that means the money is being zeroed out.
Thank you for that clarification.
And I thank you. I presume Montpelier is okay with this. There's no great commotion. This is gonna work out.
I don't think it's impacting them negatively.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
There was, from what I understood from tax, is that it was $184,000 that last year was kept in there because of the impact of the flooding and that kind of stuff. And then that's well over $1 million in terms of what they received. I believe. Cool.
Yeah, the 184 sounds very familiar from prior budgets. Yeah. So E 144 is standard annual language that speaks to the correctional facility pilot. It is just one sentence that's very descriptive that says that money comes from the pilot special fund. And that's the $40,000. And then we're at the piece that Nolan walked through. So that covered what's in the chart.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
Forgive me, I have another newbie question. When we looked at the BAA, we had a chart similar to this, and the committee weighed in on its opinion of one thing or the other, and this does not have opinion in it. So is this like a similar vehicle? Is it a different process for the budget?
It's sort of the similar, but we the Appropriations Committee is not asking for charts this year. They're asking for letters. And so, and the chart helps us process the language. And so there's one paragraph in the letter that says, in the chart, we feel good about the chart, basically.
Okay, great. Okay. Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Okay.
So I have a question, back on the municipal reimbursement program. The 142.2, did they create then a B section of 142.2 with the $1 million there? Where's the money indicated?
It's a one-time appropriation.
We're gonna take way more testimony on the municipal buyout and the pilot, and it might be included in a flood bill that's gonna come over. So that's gonna be in the next week or two.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Representative Feltus. It's tying into 142 because that is where pilots are appropriated from. But for this particular newly proposed initiative, it's being proposed to be funded with a one-time.
With a one. That would make more sense. Ongoing.
That money's for 10-year program. Just.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Folks feeling okay with the letter? Not feeling okay with the letter? Okay. Is there something we could do about the letter in the next few minutes? Okay. Great, thanks. In that case, let's do a straw poll. All those in favor of the letter, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Those abstaining include Representative Odie, who I hope feels better soon, and thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
And folks, we have really made up for lost time here. Congratulations and thank you. We are back here at 1:15.
And room 11, where we going?
We're here at 1:15 and then we're heading to room 11 from there.